Hi, I'm Nikki.
And I'm Steph.
Welcome to the Unstoppable Podcast.
This is the podcast where we sit down, have coffee, and chat about all things health, wellness, mental health, and what it means to be an unstoppable woman.
Hello, Steph.
Hi. How exciting, episode 5. 5 is my favorite number, and this is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about, and something I've become beautifully obsessed with over the last couple of years in particular. So, Nikki, today what are we talking about?
We are talking about sleep. It is such a huge topic, and there are so many points that we could touch on, but we are going to touch on a few. And if we want to do a part 2 on sleep, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to DM us, and we'll make sure to do a part 2.
Absolutely. I think maybe we'll need to do a part 2. Sleep is such a deep subject, and there's so many different elements to it. And for those listening off camera, off air, Nikki and I were talking about how to be able to keep this very surface level, because there is so much that we can delve into, and it can get very sciencey and big words and all those sort of bits and pieces. But we really wanted to use sleep as a topic to talk about practical things. So you step away from this podcast understanding what sleep actually is, what happens to your body while we're sleeping, why sometimes we wake up feeling groggy AF, and some days we wake up feeling like we're ready to take on the world, and some helpful takeaways and tools that to be able to really help you get a really good night's sleep.
So let's start with what is sleep?
Big
And I think
question.
if we think about sleep, every single organism on this planet will do some sort of sleep or hibernation. And if we think about the evolution of humans, sleep has been something that has continuously stayed with the evolution. So it must be incredibly important.
Ridiculously important. With sleep as well, I think it's such an interesting thing to think about, our lives. So when we're little, when we're babies, we sleep so often, and I definitely had a bedtime. We get told you're in bed by this point in time, and there are no if, buts, maybes about it. We see it in babies, we see it in toddlers, we see the impact of temper tantrums and lack of emotional regulation that comes from lack of sleep. He's overly tired, she needs to go to bed, that sort of side of things. And then as adults, we get control over our sleep, and we learn how to avoid it. And this is where things start to get a bit impactful physiologically for our worlds as well. We have tools at our disposal like coffee, caffeine, energy drinks that, help us feel more awake during the day, but they actually impact our sleep during the night as well. We also step into things and roles that, change our sleep cycling, things like shift work, becoming a parent, being able to live on minimal amount of sleep to be able to get through the day as well. Whereas when we're kids, there are no negotiations. We have naps, and we have bedtimes, and we make it happen, but we get told to go to bed, essentially. But as we become older, these rules get a little bit flexible because of the lives that we step into. But the fundamental importance of sleep in our world doesn't change in any way, shape, or form. So without getting too deep and too sciencey, we're going to talk about sleep stages. So what is sleep in its purest form? Nikki, do you want to jump into some sleep stages?
Sleep stages, well, for anybody who doesn't know, what happens when you go to sleep is you're basically unconscious, and your body shuts down anything that is not really important in that moment in time, and making sure that your body's recovering as much as possible. And I think before we get into some sleep stages, sleep is the number one recovery tool, because your body is only allowing the things that are most important for cellular reproduction, muscle recovery, digestion, resetting your gut microbiome, resetting and leveling out your emotional regulation as well. So that's some of the things that is incredibly important about sleep. But there are a couple different cycles that we talk about when we talk about sleep. The first one that we go into technically is a bit of light sleep. So this is when you're probably 15 to 20 minutes into like laying down in bed. It's when you're drifting off to sleep, and then we get into the REM stages. REM stages, and REM stands for rapid eye movement. There are a few different REM stages, but this is one of the first categories of our sleep.
Yeah, definitely. I think that to really understand what happens in the brain when we sleep as well, we can split them basically in half. We have non-REM sleep and we have REM sleep. So REM sleep, like Nikki named, stands for rapid eye movement sleep. And non-REM sleep, there's actually 4 stages that sit in non-REM sleep. And essentially it's the depth that varies of your sleep cycles. So it's very boring, but the 4 different stages of sleep are named stages 1 through to 4. So super boring, but they're all very, very important. So a big key takeaway to take away from today's conversation is the fact that even if you don't remember the sleep stages and that sort of side of things, that's totally fine. But the big thing to be able to take away from this is to remember that all stages of sleep are important, and not some stages are more important than the others. It just depends on the different impact of our nights. So when we step into and we go to bed, we have sleep latency. So this is the amount of time that it takes for your body to actually fall asleep before it flows into stages 1, which is your lighter stages of sleep. Essentially, stages 1 and 2 are your light sleep, stages 3 and 4 are deep sleep, and then we flow into REM cycling. Your sleep stages throughout the night will actually step into a 90-minute cycle, and like Nikki named, every mammal on this planet sleeps, and their sleep stages, their different cycles, are all different levels of duration. But as a human being, 90 minutes, and that's a key takeaway point. Remember that number. So as we go into the night, we gently fall into our light stages of sleep, deep sleep, and then it starts to cycle every 90 minutes as waves essentially come over your brain and start to detoxify the day's buildup. Essentially, your brain's like taking out the trash. Now, different stages of our night, depending on when we fall asleep to when we wake up in the morning, will actually determine which stages we step into. So things like REM sleep, or your rapid eye movement sleep, generally happens in the second half of the night. So this is a more early morning sort of vibe. And for people like me, and we'll jump into what a chronotype is. So people like me that don't do early mornings very well, learning about these sleep stages actually helps me to understand why I don't do early mornings really, really well. And I get the best REM cycles of my night generally between about 4 and 6 a.m. So if I'm able to actually stay asleep during this time, I actually wake up feeling rested. I've woken up ready to go for the day. I actually feel like I'm recovered from what's happened the day beforehand, and I always wake up a little bit clearer. But I definitely remember a period of life where 4:30 a.m. alarms were just part of life. They were just something I had to do, and I was constantly tired all day, every day, and there was nothing I could do to be able to really change that. So that kind of brings us into sleep debt. So what happens when you don't get enough sleep during the night? So as you can probably hear, this is something I'm super duper passionate about, and something I've become a little bit obsessed over. Nikki and I both have Oura rings. So this also really helps to understand sleep as its own particular, what happens in our bodies during this time period as well. So I actually got my Oura ring specifically for my sleep, and to be able to look at what I could use as a superpower, because I couldn't really understand how my husband can live off 5 hours sleep and be totally fine, whereas if I don't get enough sleep, I am the craziest person that you will ever meet.
I think me and you are very much in the same category. Emotional regulation, when I'm not sleeping my 8 hours, out the bloody window. It's gone. It's gone down the road. It's nowhere to be seen.
Absolutely. And that's the difference as well between men and women. The general prescription is between about 6 and 8 hours a night for sleep. Now, this isn't the amount of time you're actually spending in bed. It is the amount of time that you're actually asleep for. And like I said, 90 minutes. 90 minutes was the thing to be able to remember. For females, it actually sits at between 8 and 9 hours. So when we break that up into 90-minute cycles, it actually shows us how many times our body goes through a sleep cycle during the night. It also helps us to understand why sometimes we wake up feeling like we've been hit by a truck, especially if you have a daytime nap, or you get up a little bit earlier than what you would normally get up as well. It could quite possibly mean that you actually woke up in the middle of a REM cycle or in the middle of a sleep cycle, and your body wasn't actually given enough time to flow into the cycle and then flow back out again, but was rudely awoken in that midpoint.
That is a very good point you bring up about naps, Steph, and touch on that. There is a person called Matthew Walker, and he is one of the leading sleep specialists. We will link some of his podcasts, and he's actually got a book called Why We Sleep.
He
Steph has a
literally
copy of this.
wrote the book of Why We Sleep. Now, I've actually read this book and listened to his podcast as well. I will be completely honest, reading this book was hard because it is very...
I have a copy as well and didn't get through it because I fell asleep.
Yes. And what I love about Matthew Walker is the fact that he actually congratulates that and celebrates that. Like, he names it at the start of his podcast, and it's actually one of the first things that's named in this book as well, is the fact that, like, if you fall asleep reading this book, that he freaking loves that. And what I love about that is because he is so passionate about the curiosity behind why we sleep, what we do, the benefits that it brings to our body, to our mind, to our soul, in every single facet, that if you're getting some sleep, then that's freaking amazing. But, as we were talking about before, as adults, sleep tends to be on the back burner. Like, we go out to all hours of the morning, or I want to get to the gym earlier. So, you know what? I'm going to get up earlier in the day and create more time as to like what happens, for more time for the things that happen during our waking hours versus our sleeping hours. But Matthew Walker has some fantastic resources around it. And if you're wondering why your sleep is not as good of a quality as you would like it to be, become curious, get a little bit obsessed with it. Figure out how you're able to use this very free superpower to be able to change your world.
100%. Sleep, like we said at the start, is the number one recovery tool, and it can make the biggest difference in achieving your goals, whether it's body recomp, whether it's hormonal regulation, whatever your goal is. And definitely go and look up Matthew Walker. He has he has his own podcast, and he's also done episodes with like Andrew Huberman and Stephen Bartlett as well. And there's always research coming out about sleep, so it's always being updated. But like we said, the key number or the key thing to remember is 90 minutes. And in naps, like Steph just mentioned, sometimes when you're waking up in the middle of that 90-minute cycle, it means that you're jolted out of a deep sleep or jolted out of one of those stages. So you don't feel as good because your body hasn't had time to do that full 90-minute cycle. So something I learnt from Matthew Walker is relating that 90-minute cycle to naps. Napping isn't necessarily something that should be totally avoided if you feel like your body needs it. For example, for myself personally, I love a good afternoon nap. If I've had like an early morning or whatever it may be. But some key things to pay attention to when you are choosing to nap. Think about the 90-minute cycle. You basically either want to have a full cycle of that 90 minutes, so setting your timer for 90 minutes and then waking up, or setting your timer for under 30 minutes. The reason being is because this means that you are probably still in that light stage of sleep, which means that when you wake up after that 20 minutes, you'll feel more energized and more alert because you haven't fallen all the way in to that 90-minute cycle. So if you feel like you need a nap, absolutely have a nap, but just be mindful of having it a bit too late in the day can also affect you sleeping at night. But remember the 90 minutes. Naps are not a bad thing if you feel like you need them. So there's just a quick little 101 on naps.
I love that sort of takeaway as well. It's either like one or the other. You either have a 20-minute nap or a 90-minute nap, and we just have to respect the process with that. By all means, you can sleep in between those sort of numbers, but you're probably going to wake up with that groggy feeling of, like, I wish I hadn't had that nap. and shift work and jet lag and the impact of all these things that kind of change the internal rhythms of our body is a whole different topic. Hence why we're like, oh gosh, we might have to do a part 2. But essentially, like Nikki named, it builds up. Daytime naps are not a bad thing. There is actually something called sleep pressure, and your sleep pressure builds up during the day. It's a hormone essentially in the brain called adenosine, and adenosine slowly but surely builds up, creating pressure like a pressure cooker throughout the day. And each time you have a nap, you actually take the pressure off, so you feel it, right? And we hear it all the time, in terms of snacking. And I love sleep and snacking going hand in hand, because generally we start to get a bit snacky around that like 3 o'clock mark. And it's like, I want an afternoon snack. I'm looking for energy. And what's actually happening is that adenosine is building up in alignment with the sun, which kind of flows in hand with 2 different sides of this conversation. Essentially, I think we should stick with adenosine and caffeine to begin with, and then we'll jump into what is called a circadian rhythm.
They sound the same for a reason, guys, just in case you are picking up what we're putting down, but we'll chat about it.
So adenosine builds up throughout the day, and essentially that pressure gets more and more and more until we fall asleep. But as adults, we have big choices in our lives, and we can actually change that. And the really easy way, the very easily accessible in a million different ways way to be able to change that is caffeine. And caffeine actually blocks the adenosine receptors in your brain, so therefore helps to make you feel more awake. But I think we need to chat to caffeine for a split second as well, that not all caffeine is created equally, and that we don't necessarily just mean coffee when we're talking about caffeine.
Because caffeine and coffee are not exactly the same thing. And something that Matthew Walker does is he actually drinks decaf because he believes in the most amazing antioxidants that you can get from coffee. But he has had some blood tests which shows his body doesn't get rid of the caffeine very quickly. So depending on how your body reacts to caffeine, whether you're able to move it out of the system and out of the body quickly, or you're someone who it just takes a little bit longer to remove that from the body, can depend on whether you have a morning coffee, you don't have any coffee at lunchtime. It depends on the person, but he still has decaf coffee because he believes in its huge benefits for antioxidants.
What type of person are you, Nikki? Do you know? Like, how does caffeine, or how does coffee, or any form of caffeine you have in your world, like, affect you?
I think, like Steph mentioned briefly before, depending on the quality of caffeine and the coffee beans and all that sort of stuff, depends, I think, how it affects me. For example, when I have a coffee at home, I don't really notice it overly much in terms of struggling to get asleep or like any sort of major effects from it. But when I go into town and I have a coffee, usually they're fresher coffee beans and they've got 2 shots instead of 1. So I probably notice it more when I buy a store-bought coffee versus a homemade coffee.
See, like, I can have a coffee at like 6 o'clock at night and fall asleep. So it's really like, and why I ask that is because it really depends on the person, right? But I totally feel the impact if I've had too much. So I definitely also notice the impact between natural caffeine, so like having a coffee, and artificial caffeine, like having an energy drink. And not all energy drinks are created equally. There are energy drinks that have natural caffeine in them too. But natural caffeine isn't just found in coffee, it's found in things like dark chocolate, and it's found in tea. So especially if you're struggling with your sleep and you're not getting to sleep easily, or you're finding that you fall asleep but you can't stay asleep, really have a look at your life as to where caffeine is coming from, maybe from sources that you hadn't noticed before, realized that had caffeine in it. Some really easy ways to be able to swap out is, like Nikki named, decaf, but decaf still has an element of caffeine in it. Things like teas that are herbal based generally have no caffeine in them. So being able to be mindful of those routines, especially around preserving the quality of your sleep, can really make a difference.
And what time in the day you're having your coffee as well, especially if it's caffeinated and not decaf.
Absolutely. So caffeine has what's called a half-life. So essentially, if you have a double shot of coffee, 6 hours later, there will still be a shot of coffee in your system. 6 hours after that, it's going to have a half shot of coffee in your system. Now, obviously, it's always the depth that varies. It depends on how well your body can metabolize, how quickly it metabolizes, how efficiently it can be able to detox it from your system. But everybody is completely different, and that's what makes us so amazing and so beautiful as human beings. But it also means that we have our own self-responsibility to understand how these things affect our own very individual systems. Yeah.
100%.
Ooh, caffeine. I love me a good coffee. Caffeine and adenosine. So that's pretty much as like sciencey, I guess, as we're going to get for today's episode. But it does go hand in hand with circadian rhythms. So
What is a circadian rhythm, Steph?
I was like, do you want to jump in and talk about what a circadian rhythm is?
I can do that, definitely.
Absolutely,
So
go for it.
our circadian rhythm is basically our internal body clock that gives us cues for when to wake up and when to fall asleep. Something I really like to educate my clients on about sleep is to get curious about what color the sunset is and the sunrise is. So sunset is usually, it can vary, of course, usually oranges, maybe some reds in there. And the reason it is this color is because it's telling your body and your circadian rhythm via your eyes to, okay, it's getting time to wind down, to slowly get ready for bed, and basically prepare your body with that adenosine buildup or that adenosine pressure we talked about earlier to be like, okay, our pressure's built up, we've got the cue from the sunset to be able to start winding down, and that's when you should start to feel sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. Then we go through the 90-minute sleep cycles.
I love the colors. I think colors are a really easy way to be able to remember it, especially when we're talking about easy things that we can do in our environment. Nature tells us exactly what we need to do, especially to help to get a really good night's sleep. Like, you look at the color of the sun of a nighttime, you look at the color of the sunset, you look at the way that things actually sit, and the fact that essentially the sunset is those, like Nikki named, oranges and it's reds and these really deeper, darker sort of colors, but it's also the horizon points. So we see the sun coming down on our horizon. So with the things that we can control in our lives, if we're looking to get a good night's sleep and we're looking to be able to wind down, then observing the lights in your environment, especially artificial lights. And one of the easiest things that we can do in our households to be able to help to get a really good night's sleep is to follow the sun. We're looking for warm lights, things like that are more oranges type of darker colors. It was one of the first things we did when my husband and I moved into our house was we changed all the lights. Every single light in my house is dimmable in every single area.
And why did you decide to change your lights from the normal blue light, as we might say, to dimmable lights?
Well, the dimmable lights, one, like practical things, right? You think about when you wake up first thing in the morning and you're like, I gotta turn on the light. And it feels like you've walked into like a hospital or like an airport, and you're like, you feel like you've been hit by like, the ton of bricks all simultaneously. So over nighttime, we could turn everything down. It always helps in the morning as well, especially if it's still dark outside, to be able to slowly replicate the sunrise, which brings us into the start of the day, right? Those different colors that come in from the sunrise too. And it's hand in hand with the question that you just asked. Because our sunrise, we look for purples and blues, and then those lights start to come through, and essentially the sun is rising up above us. So when we replicate things that are happening in our environment, we remind our body the fact that we are needing to wake up right now. The sun is coming up, the lights are blue, the lights are purples, the lights are above us. And that prompts us to function for the day, essentially. Whereas over nighttime, we're repping sunset. So we want warm lights, we want them on the horizon, we want them coming down as much as we possibly can, especially for the things that are within our control. I do love a good lamp for that too.
100%. And I think that kind of goes into sometimes why shift workers, we're not going to get into it, but sometimes why shift workers have such a trouble sleeping is because sometimes they're going the opposite way. They're
Absolutely.
waking up when it's sun setting and working throughout the night and then having to go asleep when the sun is basically telling you, hey, let's go to sleep. So their circadian rhythm is more challenged, but that's basically what circadian rhythm is. And I really love that you brought up the lights, Steph, and something for anybody who has an alarm clock and doesn't want their phone doing the very, very big jolting alarms that they have set on those. I have recently got a sunrise clock.
I really want to invest in one of those.
I think it was $70 from Amazon. So worthwhile investment. Just waking up now for me is so much calmer, and I find it's really good because you can set it and it can bring the light slowly in before your alarm. So I find now that I actually wake up while it's coming up, and I wake up before my alarm. So it's really bloody cool, and it also just makes my nervous system not as like jolted, like I'm not like awake out of my deep sleep or out of my sleep cycle. So if people have got an alarm clock and they want to maybe invest in a new one, would highly, highly recommend.
Absolutely. And the thing to remember about circadian rhythms is the fact that it is innate. They are built into our body, and in a very straightforward way of saying it, there's really nothing you can do about that. Like, this is the way that we're designed. They've done studies where they've actually put people in the complete darkness and removed the sunlight from their environment, and has shown the fact that our bodies will still do the exact thing that they did if the sun was around as well. So that definitely goes hand in hand with talking about shift work, when our worlds get flipped on their heads, and we can use these tools at our disposal like caffeine to be able to essentially trick our body. Lights, caffeine, trick our body into thinking that it's daytime when it's not. But it's also why we also get a massive repercussion in many different facets of our whole physiology and psychology if we are in shift works for prolonged periods of time.
100%. And I think while we're on the topic of circadian rhythm and flowing into those different colors of the sunrise and sunset, I think it's important to quickly talk about electronics and devices at nighttime.
Absolutely, yes.
So if we recap, we just chatted about the sunset is usually those oranges and reds, and the sunrise is usually purple, blues, and then coming into maybe some of those oranges as well, depending where you are in the world. But the blues and the purples are telling us and telling our brain to wake up. So another thing to pinpoint possibly if you're struggling to get to sleep is your electronic devices. And we know how easy it is to just scroll while you're in bed, like Instagram Reels, TikTok, whatever it may be. But that might be the thing that is stopping you from getting to sleep. You try to put it down, you try to go to sleep for 5 minutes, and then you get frustrated because you're not going to sleep, then you repeat the cycle. So those blue lights from your electronic devices are telling your brain, hey, this is blue, our circadian rhythm should be awake now, not going to sleep. So it's giving our brain mixed signals. So if you are someone who has their phone in their bedroom or is doing work at night, there are like wearable glasses that you can invest in to be able to stop some of that blue light to help your circadian rhythm, help you get to sleep. But I think that was just an important thing to touch on.
Absolutely. The best way to be able to help your sleep quality at that time of night is to stay off the devices. For anyone that comes to us that says, I'm not sleeping optimally, or maybe they've got goals that they're actually not achieving, I will look at their sleep first and essentially their health, their sleep health around a wind down routine. When we look at devices, it's not even just the light that's coming from the device. It's the fact that as human beings, we also mirror neurons. We mirror people's emotions. So I don't know about you, but I cannot do like adrenaline movies or like thrillers or like that sort of side of things at nighttime, because my heart, like, oh my gosh, I'm like running with the person that's on the screen. So not only am I absorbing blue lights into my life, I'm actually prompting adrenaline to run through my system in a time where my body's naturally trying to wind down as much as it basically physiologically can. But I've got the control over the interventions. It's also things like scrolling on social media and emotions like self-comparison, or, looking at somebody else's life, and then it starts to open the floodgates of the internal dialogue that goes from there as well. Sleep and the end of the day should really be a sacred space. And one of the tools I actually really love for the end of the day, outside of just making sure that my lights are all mirroring that circadian rhythm, watching my blue lights, make sure everything stays really low. I try and stay off technology for at least the hour before I head to bed. But the other thing I really find helpful for a busy mind is to be able to brain dump, to take it all out of my mind and just put it on a piece of paper. And I will opt for a piece of paper over my phone, because phones are generally that rabbit hole of, oh, and now I'm on this, and oh, and now I'm on that. And we can very, very quickly get into things that pull us out of our natural chill state. But whereas when you write things on a piece of paper or you read a physical book, that's why when you read a book, you actually start to feel a bit tired, because we're still stimulated in the mind. You know, when it's a really good book, I've had those nights where I'm like invested. Yeah.
Yeah. So I personally love to read a good like rom-com. Like, I'm reading the Elise Silver trilogy at the moment, and it is just so good. But
Yeah.
I agree, Steph, like if you're writing stuff on a phone, you can get sucked in, because that's what social media is designed to do. It's designed to keep you attentive. And a quick side note, if you do struggle with your phone at nighttime, it might be like investing in something like the Brick, which I've recently invested in. It's basically you set it up, you tap your phone, it locks the apps that you want it to lock, and if you go and unlock it, it's a physical thing you have to do. Whereas I know screen time, if you do it via your iPhone, you can just be like another 15 minutes, another 15 minutes, it's there. But if you put your, for example, my Brick is on my fridge, the side of my fridge, I have to go and physically tap it. And if you're physically tapping it, you're thinking about it. So that is an action that you have to be accountable for if you're going to unlock it.
That's so cool, because I definitely lean into screen time. I think that was one of the most amazing updates that I have an iPhone that Apple had brought into that space. It made me really conscious of how much I was on my phone. So my screen time runs from 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. and then cuts off with everything. And even that was an ability to be able to notice how much I was just mindlessly going onto things, especially late at night.
Yeah. So just another tool in your toolbox if you would like to take that away. Do we have any other points or basic things that we could help the listeners with in terms of their nighttime routine?
I think females in particular, and obviously we support so many incredible boss women around the world, temperature is a really, really big one as well. So, you know, we've controlled our circadian rhythm, we've controlled our environment, we've turned all those blue lights away, we're in this really beautiful ambient sort of space, we're controlling our things that we're observing from an external lens, we're off social media, we're off our phones, we're reading a book. But as women, our body temperature tends to be a little bit hotter than guys, and depending on which stage you're at in your life, this all aligns into our overall hormones. So the temperature of your room can make a really, really big difference as well. The optimal sleeping temperature is around about 18 degrees. So if you live in a very cold environment, like Nikki left our beautiful Northern Territory environment for, this may be something that's a lot easier to be able to do, because the room is naturally at those sort of temperatures, or even colder. I'd say it's colder in your world at the moment.
Yeah, it definitely is. In saying that, generally, in order for us to fall into a sleep, generally your body temperature drops around 1 to 2 degrees. And it's funny that you say that, Steph, about the optimal temperature to be able to fall asleep. I actually have noticed personally that when I have a hot shower, jump into bed, which is freezing cold, I read my book for about 4 pages, unless it's getting a bit spicy, then I continue. But I go to sleep like that. Whereas when I was in Darwin, because you are in an air-conditioned, in the wet season,
Artificial environment, yeah.
I found it not as easy to go to sleep in Darwin versus here. I'm like, easy peasy.
100%. I love that you brought up like the hot shower as well. I noticed that the other night in particular. I hadn't had a bath in so long, and I was like, I'm gonna have a bath tonight. And I slept the best that I have in, so I can't even remember how long. And I really put it down to that. There were a couple of things that happened with my bath. It wasn't just the warm water. I also put Epsom salts in the bath, so an absorption of magnesium to be able to help muscles relax as well. But we've found, not just us, they have found, the powers that be, the people that do the incredible research, they have found the impact of magnesium on our sleep cycling to be such a helping hand, essentially, to be able to give really good quality. And I feel like the combination of soaking in a warm bath, jumping into a cool room, and the magnesium really, really helped. I had the best training session I think I have had, again, in forever, and I woke up ready to like take on the whole world. And if I could do that routine every single night, I would. But I think there are some easy things that we can do in our lives, like a warm shower before bed, that becomes really achievable versus, you know, soaking in a bathtub for an hour every day.
And also the water bill, like we can't forget
Oh my
that,
God,
especially if you've got a deep ass bath.
Darwin dry season things too, the water bills, because the crunchy grass is a whole different thing. But that little bit of lux, you know, having a bath, even the magnesium piece as well. I love a good like soap or shower gel that actually has magnesium infused in it. Or even one of the suggestions I'll give if you don't have a bath is to be able to just get a big like sort of like a trough bucket of water and actually soak your feet in Epsom salts and magnesium. The warmth that's absorbed and the way that the magnesium is absorbed topically, so through your skin, gives us a better level essentially than what it is ingested and then having to be distributed throughout our bodies as well.
Yeah, great tip. Well, that was so much on sleep. We hope everybody learnt something from this episode, but we will be doing a part 2 on sleep, I feel. It's just needed. Do you have anything else that you want to mention before we wrap this up, Steph?
No, I think we're definitely going to need a part 2. I think, like we've named a couple of times this episode, we tried to keep it very surface level, a couple of things that you can take away from it, but it can get very, very deep and sciencey. So if we want to get deeper, if we want to talk sciencey, I know there are a lot of gorgeous women in our communities that are shift workers that do incredible things in high pressure environments, like nurses and doctors and those that work out in mine sites as well, especially being in the Northern Territory. I feel we'll take away some helpful tips that we can do to be able to help to get a good quality night's sleep. We'll have a look at your environment, a bit of homework from today's episodes. Have a look at your environment, see the things that are around, and even name the amount of bright lights, the amount of white lights you have in your world. Maybe look at something like a blue light blocking or a orange light glasses if you cannot avoid being on technology late at night as well. And really just become curiosity about your own body. What time of night when you go to bed do you get the best night's sleep? I think we could be our own investigators in a whole nother level as to what we could do as a natural tool to be able to ensure our bodies not just function day to day.
100%. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of The Importance of Sleep. If you have any thoughts or feelings, comment them below or head over to our Instagram, jug.fitness, Facebook, Juggernaut Fitness, and we will be more than happy to answer your questions. And we hope you have the most unstoppable day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.